providing you with a lot of background information and some review that will make you fully prepared for this tomorrow. So let's go to the course page for today and talk about what our plan is here. So there is a document, if you go to today's course page, that's embedded right here where it says review causes and effects of the war. Can you please put that into Notability for me? So what I've done is I've made a cause and effect chart that we're going to fill out together. That's going to give you a lot of information and organization as we, oops. Looks like my video.
I can't hear you. No.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. We may have to kind of change things up here. So, all right, hang on just a second. I don't know what's going on here. All right, I'm going to try to go back to the computer audio and see if that works real quick. So give me just a second here. Can you all hear me again?
Yeah.
Okay, I lost my whole meeting platform, so we're going to have to try this again. All right, so in the meantime, go ahead and make sure that document is in Notability, and what we're going to do is we're basically going to be filling in the boxes, because we're looking at, when we talk about events in American history, we're focused on cause and effect, what leads up to the situation, and what is the end result. Very little, I mean, it's not going to be very often that we get into a situation where we are going to focus a lot on the specifics of a conflict that has to do with like a war. Like we will talk in great detail about the Civil War, but this is a war where we're not going to break down battle tactics. We're not going to break down, you know, circumstances with, all right. You all should be able to hear me now, back on the computer. Are we all good now?
Yeah.
Logan, you said you weren't able to hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Say that one more time.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm having issues. It's not your all's fault, it's my fault. So my computer's not cooperating. Okay, let's start here. So let's look at the first box here, and we're gonna fill this first part in. So we need to think about what we've read, what we've talked about in class, what I know that Mr. Connerly talked about with you, and we're gonna be completing this section so we can start talking about what leads to the War of 1812. So one of the first things we know that happens is that the British began the practice of impressment. Anybody remind me what impressment means? What is impressment? This is something that we've heard a little bit already, but I want to come back and see what this means. So, Addie, can you tell us what impressment means?
I forget.
Okay, Landon, what does impressment mean?
Doesn't it mean like, I don't remember.
Okay, let's go back here. Impressment was kidnapping of American sailors at sea. Okay, what the British were doing is they would board American ships that were taking goods from America, going across the ocean to sell them to countries in Europe. Okay, and what that meant is that those goods were intended to go to France or Belgium or Britain or whatever, and in some cases, Britain would stop and interrupt that trade and interrupt that process. And what they did is they began to kidnap the American sailors. And why this is such a problem is that Britain said that these sailors were actually British naval officers. That means people that worked in the British Navy that had quit the British Navy. So they deserted. All right. We're talking about 5,000 to 7,000 sailors kidnapped. Now let's think about this for a moment. What Britain did is they decided to basically state that these sailors on board were in fact British Navy officers. They were serving in the British Navy, part of the British military, and they quit and they deserted. And so what Britain said they were doing all along was just getting them back to serve in this position like they were supposed to, okay? So that's, and again, today, if this happened today, this would be a huge concern. This would be something that would be a huge problem, okay? So that's the first, and this is a major cause. And I'm going to bold this word if I can. I may not be able to. I'm working in PDF, so it may not allow me to. That's all right. But this is a major cause. But this is a war that's caused by situations that happen at sea and on land. So now we're going to look at what happens on land. All right. One of the things that is discussed in the reading, and one of the things that we know, is that Americans want to push west as a country, expanding west. So that means, if you want me to give you, I'm going to give you a visual here so that you can see this, so that we understand what we're talking about here. because I want to make sure. I'm a visual learner. I know for a lot of people, if they see something on a map or something in a picture, it makes more sense to them. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you this map here really quick so that you can see what I'm talking about here. Okay. All right. So what we're looking at here is, again, Americans wanting to go this direction. They're wanting to push west because there's land available in this territory and there's going to be land available here. Now, I know this says colony of Spain, but we buy this in 1803. So this is all our land. I'm just showing you an earlier map. But the trend is that America wants to go west. And when they move west, what group of people do they encounter? Not the Spanish, but what group of people have white settlers encountered for hundreds of years in this area of the world? Who have they encountered? Who are these people? What group of people?
Indians.
Native Americans, yeah. Native Americans have been in this area well before European descendants and settlers came here. And one thing we do know is that when you have Native Americans and white settlers in the same area, there tend to be conflict because Native Americans want to stay on their land, settlers are looking to gain that land, and that usually ends in a conflict. And so what we need to do is we need to go back and we need to look at what is the cause of how this is a conflict. All right. And so one of these issues that we actually see takes place where we are in Indiana. One of these issues actually takes place in Indiana in what is called the Battle of Tippecanoe. You may have heard about this in 4th grade a little bit. So what happens is, in Indiana, you have a conflict between a large confederacy of Native Americans that are led by a man named Tecumseh, and they are trying to resist those settlements. And what ends up happening is that they have conflict with these settlers in that area, all right? And they have a major conflict called the Battle of Tippecanoe, which is up near West Lafayette, Indiana. It's only a couple hours from us. And what is discovered is those Native Americans were receiving weapons from the British. Now, how were they getting weapons from the British? Well, they were getting them from Canada. So we're going to go back to this map again. I know I'm ping-ponging all over the place, but I got to give you a visual here so this helps you understand what's going on. All right? So what we may not realize is just how close Canada is. This whole white area up here at the top, this is Canada. And what was happening is that you had the British bringing weapons into this area from Canada and trading weapons with Native Americans. And so what happened was Native Americans were getting weapons from the British and using those weapons to resist or push back against settlements by white American settlements that wanted to go west, okay? And so let's look at how that could be a cause then. Well, if you are a settler that moves into that area and you discover that Native Americans are receiving weapons from the British to resist your movement west, that's going to make you very angry because you feel as if the British are interfering with your ability to push west. So how can we word this? Let's talk about this, okay? Native Americans in the western frontier. That's an area that has not a lot of development. It's an area that has a lot of wilderness, very undeveloped. Native Americans in the western frontier, including the Indiana Territory, because we're not a state yet, were using weapons from the British to resist American settlers. This led to major conflict. Okay. Now, again, we're pairing this cause that happens at sea with this cause that happens on land. And again, you would think that what the British were doing at sea would be more than enough to want to compel Americans or encourage Americans to go to war. But in fact, this angered Americans just as much, because Native Americans, and let's face it, the unfortunate reality is that conflict between white settlers and natives has existed at this time and going back a couple hundred years, okay, ever since European settlers arrived in North America. So this is not changing, but what makes Americans upset is that the natives are getting weapons from the British. So it's almost like the British are trying to make things difficult for the American settlers. All right. The last thing we need to look at is really why this war happens, in terms of, are people happy about this war? Okay. Are they wanting this war to actually take place? Because there's, if you think about in American history, we've had wars that brought people together and people felt very passionate about it occurring, like World War II or the American Revolution. But this is one of those wars that's very divided. And what I mean by that is that for the number of people who wanted the war, there was an equal number of people almost that didn't want the war. Okay? And so I'm going to backtrack here in just a minute and kind of give you some main points here. First of all, this is the first time in American history that our country officially declares war on another nation. Okay? The first time. And when you are voting on going to war, what you end up doing is you have a vote in Congress. Congress, remember, is the legislative branch, has the House of Representatives and the Senate. Okay? And they decide who's going to go to war. That is the vote that takes place. All right? And if you look here on this key, you'll notice there are 5 different groups on this map. And they're represented by these 5 different kind of shadings on the map. Okay, so we look at the map key over here on the left, and we're looking at how these are divided. And really the reason why they're divided this way is because these regions differ in a lot of ways for 2 reasons. They are different based on their economy, how they make money, and they're different based on the political parties that they support. But I want to pay attention to these 2 to start, because look how they voted here. How did each of these regions vote on the issue of going to war with Britain? Somebody tell me. Look at the map. How did they vote? How did they vote? Were they in favor of going to war, or were they against going to war? Keegan, what do you see on the map? What's this telling you right here? What's the key telling you? These 2 regions, were they for war or against?
People were towards no.
Say that one more time. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
More people were towards no.
Okay. In these 2 regions, you'll notice that the vote is more for not going to war than it is for going to war. In other words, these 2 regions don't want to go to war. These other 3 regions do want to go to war. And notice how this region, the Western Frontier, it's 9-0, it's unanimous. But let's focus right here on this region that I'm circling here, okay? Why, does anybody want to take a guess why this region that I circled would not want to go to war with Britain? What would be a reason why this region would not want to go to war with Britain? Any idea what this region of the country does to make money? What's their economy based on? Is it based on farming, or is it based on trade, buying and selling of goods? What do you think? Drew, what do you think here? This region I circled, would this region be more about trade or more about farming?
Trade.
Yeah, this is a region about trade. Part of the reason is that the further north you go in the country, ladies and gentlemen, the colder it gets. Okay, this region cannot grow crops the way they can in the south. Okay, so this dark shaded area that says the south on the key, this region's all about farming. It has a warmer climate, more tropical, humid climate. They can grow crops like tobacco and cotton, sugar cane, and so forth. This region that I circled, they have to trade to make money. And who do you think they want to trade more than anybody? Well, that's Britain. Because Britain buys and sells goods with the United States in more than anybody, really. And so if you're going to war with a country that like Britain, they aren't going to trade with you. So the biggest reason why these two regions vote against going to war is because it would disrupt their ability to make money through trade. All right? Because again, this is a war that's very divided. You have a lot of people that want to go to war and a lot of people that don't. This is not everybody's all in, we're 100% committed to supporting the war. Now, if you look down here at the bottom, notice how this region, the Western frontier, votes yes, 9-0. It's basically this region. Well, why would they want to go to war? Well, they're the region that is affected the most by the conflict with Native Americans. And that's the region that is upset when they find out that the British have supplied natives with weapons, okay? So let's go back. Let's go back to our chart, and we're going to fill the rest of this out. All right, I'm going to talk you through it here. So one other thing that is a cause is this division. Let's just say Americans, a little bit bigger, apologize that the text is small. Americans were divided on war. The New England region did not want war because it would disrupt trade. Areas of the South and West wanted war because of conflict with Native Americans. Okay. Now, this last box is just explaining the divisiveness of the country. Part of it wants the war, part of it doesn't. And one thing you should see from that is that if the country's not completely in favor of war, it's going to make it harder to be successful. Okay. So now we're going to look at the effects. We've talked about the effects a little bit, and the reading also discussed the impact or overall impact of this war. The absolute number one greatest impact or effect of this war is the increased amount of pride in the country, because we did not lose the war, we did not win the war, but we fought and went toe-to-toe with the greatest military force on earth. And for Americans, they feel that we finally have arrived as a country. We have arrived as a major nation. So let's say American pride and patriotism is at an all-time high. We as a nation feel that we have become a major country in the world. And so that we're going to start getting the respect that we deserve as a nation. All right. It's very evident if you look at primary sources and stories from after the war that Americans felt very good about the fact that we were able to win this conflict. They felt very good about it. Okay. And that's one thing that is significant. All right. So the next thing we're going to look at, the next effect is we're actually going to go to the bottom. We'll go here. Okay. Now, one thing you need to understand is that when I'm going from left to right on the screen, it's not going to be that the first box is a direct cause that relates to the right box. I'm just talking about 3 causes and 3 effects. So you're not necessarily connecting the first row together, then the second row together, then the third row together. So the second thing that we do need to talk about is that the United States, trying to make this bigger font, I'm sorry, began to increase manufacturing and industry. And what that means is that because we were a country at war, one of the things that you can't really do during a war is be able to trade goods. But if you're the United States and you still need to be able to buy and sell those goods, one of the things that you have to do is you have to figure out a way to make the goods that you need. And so what happens is in the North, that area that couldn't really trade during the war had to figure out a way to make the same goods in the country, in the United States, that it was usually trading. All right. And so the United States began to industrialize and manufacture goods. And what that means is that they're going to start the Industrial Revolution, which we're going to talk about more. So I'm going to say the Industrial Revolution begins to become more, I don't like that wording. The Industrial Revolution begins to increase. Sorry, I'm trying to think of wording here. The Industrial Revolution becomes a major part of the U.S. and their economy. All right. The last thing I want to talk about is what happens because part of the country does not want to go to war. Okay. Now, I'm going to go back to this map really quick. I know we're about 6 minutes here. So one of the things I want to point out, and this is something when you looked at those electoral maps way back when with Mr. Connerly, we know as a country that one of the things that divides us also is based on political parties. And in this region right here that I circled, that region is heavily supportive of the Federalist Party. The Federalist Party was that party that John Adams was a part of, that Alexander Hamilton was a part of. It's not really had a lot of major power for a long time, but it's still kind of located in this region. That region also, the Federalists, they didn't want to have bad relations with Britain. They wanted to be on good terms with Britain, which is part of the reason, again, why you see those 2 areas vote against the war. And so what happens is, if the war is over and everybody's feeling great about the country and everybody's feeling pride and patriotism, one of the things that's going to happen is that the United States is going to remember who that group was that didn't support the war at the very beginning. They're going to wonder who that group was. And that group is going to be the Federalists. They're going to be the ones that are going to be considered the enemy. And so we'll look at this last effect, because the Federalist Party in New England is a group of states, were opposed to war. They are viewed as un-American. I don't know why that's misspelled. It shouldn't be. All right. And then the last thing is the Federalist Party begins to decline after the war and will never recover. And what that means is that because they were opposed to the war and because people pointed them out as being anti-American, they're going to be the ones that ultimately are going to suffer the most, because when we talk about the next couple elections, when we have people running for president, the Federalist Party is not going to really be able to have any kind of success. Okay. All right. So we've hit on the major causes and the major effects of the war here. All right. And so let me talk really quickly about tomorrow. So tomorrow we are going to be taking an assessment. And what I want to make sure you see here is I put this right here, and I'm going to post this in the Canvas calendar. First of all, just a reminder, our session starts at 8:05. All right. And 8:05 is when we're going to get started with the quiz. So it's important that you are here at 8:05, because I'm going to have the window open to complete the assessment. And after that window's closed, we're going to have to arrange a time for you to do it afterwards, because I want to make sure that we have enough time to get that done. It's going to be some multiple choice. It's going to be some constructed response. Okay. And we're going to be doing that through Canvas. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about tomorrow? Okay. All right. So again, just to clarify, tomorrow we're going to be assessing. Make sure you are here by 8:05, please. I know it's hard to get up in the morning. I totally get it, and I appreciate all of you that are here. But just remember, 8:05. Here's the cause and effect chart again. Okay. I will send that out to you if you were just popping in here. I can send this to you so you have it. But this is what we talked about today in class. This is what we discussed. It'll also be something that you can view on the recording. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and let you go so you can have a few minutes before your next class. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the tech issues today, and I'll see you tomorrow.